The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for nearly a kilometer, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that glowed with the light of captured stars. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the very center of it all, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her entire life. Around her rose the delegates of 12 elder empires, each one belonging to species that had conquered the stars while humanity was still learning to make fire, and every single one of them was laughing at her. The Kethra High Sovereign, a massive creature covered in scales of deep purple and gold, sat upon a throne that floated above everyone else, and his laughter was the loudest of all. His 4 eyes sparkled with cruel amusement as he pointed one clawed finger directly at the human delegation. "Look at them," Malkuth bellowed to the assembled empires. "These short-lived creatures who think they deserve a voice in our councils. They live barely a century, and yet they dare to ask us for reduced tribute." More laughter filled the hall, echoing off walls decorated with the flags of conquered worlds. And Elena felt her hands shake with rage that she had learned to hide many years ago. The Velshan delegate, a being made of what appeared to be living shadow, spoke in whispers that somehow reached every corner of the room. "Perhaps we should be kind to them. After all, they are little more than clever animals who learned to build starships by copying our discarded technology." Elena remembered her training and kept her face completely blank, showing nothing of the fire burning inside her chest. She bowed her head like a good submissive human was expected to do. Behind her stood the rest of Earth's delegation, 12 men and women who represented all of humanity's colonies, and every single one of them played their role perfectly, looking defeated and small and harmless. This was the way it had been for 300 years since humanity first made contact with the Galactic Concord. The elder races had taken one look at the young species from the third planet of an unremarkable star and decided that humans were beneath their notice. They had been wrong about many things. High Sovereign Malkuth raised one massive hand, and the laughter died away instantly, proving just how much power the Kethra Dominion held over the other empires. When Malkuth spoke, everyone listened. "I have decided," he announced with a smile that showed rows of razor-sharp teeth, "that the human tribute will increase by 40% starting immediately. They will deliver rare minerals from their outer colonies. They will provide workers for our mining operations, and they will do so without complaint." Elena stepped forward, and her voice came out steady and humble. "High Sovereign, our colonies are already struggling to meet current demands. An increase of this size will cause great hardship to our people." "Silence!" Malkuth roared, and his voice hit Elena like a physical force, making her step backward. "You are useful vermin, nothing more. Be grateful we allow you to exist at all." The other delegates nodded in agreement, and the Torgan Imperium's representative, a being of living metal and fire, added his own cruel observation. "The humans should remember what happened to the Nexari when they refused to pay their tribute. There is not a single Nexari left alive today." Elena remembered the Nexari very well. She had seen the recordings of their homeworld burning, watched their cities crumble to ash while the elder empires watched and did nothing. That genocide had happened just 50 years ago as a lesson to all lesser species. "We will meet the new demands," Elena said quietly, and she bowed again. "Lower this time." Malkuth laughed once more and waved his hand in dismissal. "Of course you will. Now leave our sight before we decide to take even more." The human delegation turned and walked out of the great hall with slow and measured steps, their heads down and their shoulders hunched, looking exactly like the broken and defeated species the elder races believed them to be. But as the massive doors closed behind them, cutting off the sound of alien laughter, something changed in the way the humans carried themselves. Their backs straightened and their eyes grew hard and cold. Elena looked at her fellow delegates and saw the same controlled fury on every face. They had all played this game for their entire careers, pretending to be weak while knowing the truth that burned in every human heart. Captain David Okonkwo, the military attaché who had stood silent through the entire humiliation, spoke first. 300 years. 300 years of this, and it ends soon. Elena replied, and her voice held no trace of the submission she had shown moments before. Have you received the latest reports from Neptune? David nodded slowly, and a smile appeared on his face that would have terrified anyone who saw it. The 20th Fleet completed final assembly last month. We now have full operational capacity. The other delegates began to talk excitedly among themselves, but Elena raised her hand for silence. They were still in Concord space, and there could be listening devices anywhere. She led them through the corridors of the space station toward their shuttle, and with every step she thought about what was hidden in the dark places of the solar system. The elder races believed that humanity had accepted the restrictions placed upon them. They believed humans were too primitive to build anything larger than a frigate. They believed that the ship size limitations they had imposed were being followed. They had never thought to look beyond what their sensors could detect. Deep beneath the frozen moons of Neptune, in caverns of ice and stone that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, the first of the hidden shipyards had begun operation 200 years ago. In the Oort cloud, among the billions of icy rocks that drifted in the darkness at the edge of the solar system, asteroid bases have been hollowed out and converted into construction facilities. And in pocket dimensions that humanity had learned to fold into existence using technology the elder races could not even imagine, the true human fleet was taking shape. Not frigates, not cruisers, not even battleships. The humans were building leviathans. Each one stretched for 12 kilometers from bow to stern, armed with weapons that could crack planets and protected by shields that could withstand the combined firepower of an entire elder fleet. 20 full battle fleets, each containing over 200 capital ships, had been constructed in absolute secrecy while humanity bowed and scraped before their oppressors. 4,000 warships that would change the galaxy forever. Elena reached the shuttle and paused at the airlock, looking back toward the Great Hall, where the elder races continued their celebration of human weakness. Enjoy your laughter while you can, she whispered, and the words were a promise that had been 2 centuries in the making. You taught us. That power is the only thing that matters. We learned that lesson better than you could ever imagine. The shuttle doors closed, and the human delegation began the long journey home, carrying with them the knowledge that would soon shake the foundations of every empire in the galaxy. The mocked species had not been idle during their years of humiliation. They had been preparing. Admiral Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of the UHS Prometheus and felt the weight of history pressing down upon his shoulders like nothing he had ever experienced before. Below him stretched the main hangar bay, a cavern of metal and light that could hold a small city. And beyond the reinforced windows, he could see the rest of the First Fleet floating in perfect formation against the backdrop of folded space. The Prometheus herself was a monster of human engineering. 12 kilometers of armor plating and quantum cannons and fusion engines that burned with the fury of captured suns. She was the largest warship ever constructed by any species in the known galaxy. And she was just one of 4,000. Marcus had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, training in secret facilities that existed in dimensions the elder races could not perceive, learning to command weapons that could destroy worlds. Now the time for hiding was almost over. Commander Sarah Eulerin approached from behind, her boots making soft sounds on the metal deck. Admiral, all 20 fleets report ready status. We are awaiting your final authorization. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the view of the assembled warships. Tell me again, Sarah. Tell me how we came to this moment. Sarah understood what he was asking. This was a ritual that every officer in the Hidden Fleet performed before major operations, a way of reminding themselves why they fought. "It began 203 years ago," she said, and her voice took on the tone of someone reciting sacred history. "When Dr. Yuki Tanaka discovered the principles of dimensional folding while working at a research station on Europa." Marcus closed his eyes and listened to the words he had heard 1,000 times before. Dr. Tanaka realized that space could be folded in ways the elder races had never imagined. She found dimensions that existed alongside our own, invisible to any sensor technology the Concorde possessed. And she understood immediately what this meant for humanity. The elder races had placed strict limits on human military development. No warship larger than a frigate, no weapons above a certain power level, no expansion beyond the outer colonies. They believed these restrictions would keep humanity weak and controllable forever. But they had never considered that humans might build their fleet somewhere they could not see. Dr. Tanaka brought her discovery to the United Human Government in secret. Sarah continued, and the leaders of that time made a decision that would shape the next 2 centuries. They would build a hidden military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The doctrine of silence was born. Every human who learned the secret took an oath to never reveal it, no matter the cost. Families passed the knowledge from generation to generation, parents telling children on their deathbeds, brothers and sisters keeping the faith through decades of Concorde oppression. "The first shipyard was constructed beneath the ice of Triton," Sarah said, using dimensional folding technology to hide the construction from Concorde sensors. "It took 30 years to build, and another 20 years before the first Leviathan-class warship was completed." Marcus had seen recordings of that first ship, the U.S. Awakening, sliding out of its construction bay into the hidden space that humanity had claimed for itself. The workers who built her had wept with joy and rage, knowing they would never live to see her used. That was the true cost of the doctrine of silence. Generations of humans have lived and died keeping the secret, building ships they would never command, forging weapons they would never fire. Grandparents laid the keels of warships their grandchildren would captain. "The elder races mocked our short lifespans," Sarah said quietly, "but they never understood what it meant. We do not plan for ourselves, we plan for those who come after." Every human who worked on this project knew they were building a future they would never see. Dr. Tanaka herself had died 40 years before the Prometheus was even begun. But her legacy lived in every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology that humanity had developed in secret. The dimensional fold drive was her greatest invention, allowing ships to move through folded space at speeds that made the elder races' fastest vessels look like they were standing still. A Leviathan could cross the entire galaxy in hours. "For 2 centuries, Sarah concluded, humanity has played the role of the obedient servant, bowing to the Concorde, paying tribute to the Kethra, accepting humiliation after humiliation. But we were never broken, we were never defeated, we were waiting." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his commander with fierce pride burning in his gaze. "And now the waiting is over." He turned to face the holographic display that dominated the center of the observation deck, showing the positions of all 20 hidden fleets. 4,000 warships crewed by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Show me the target," he commanded. The display shifted to show Kethra Prime, the homeworld of the most cruel and powerful of the Elder Empires. It was a massive planet circled by 7 moons, each one converted into a military fortress, defended by a fleet of 3,000 warships. The Kethra believed themselves invincible. They had conquered 100 worlds and enslaved a dozen species. They demanded tribute from humanity and laughed at human weakness. They had no idea what was coming. The Kethra have approximately 3,000 combat vessels in their home defense fleet, Sarah reported, with their largest being the Imperial Dreadnought class at just under 2 kilometers in length. Marcus smiled grimly. Our smallest escort frigates are 3 times that size. He studied the display for a long moment, considering the battle plan that had been refined over decades of preparation. This would not be a war, it would be a demonstration. The elder races taught us a valuable lesson, he said finally. They taught us that power is the only language the galaxy understands. They taught us that the strong rule and the weak serve. They taught us that mercy is weakness. He paused and looked around at his bridge crew, seeing the same determination on every face. We will show them what happens when the weak become strong. We will show them what 200 years of patient rage looks like. We will show them that humanity never forgets and never forgives. The crew responded with a roar of approval that shook the observation deck. Marcus raised his hand for silence and spoke the words that would change the course of galactic history. All fleets, prepare for dimensional transition. Destination Kethra Prime. We jump in 1 hour. Throughout the hidden dimension, 4,000 warships began to power up their full drives, their crews taking their positions for the battle that had been 2 centuries in the making. In the memorial hall of the Prometheus, Marcus stopped before a wall covered with names, millions of names, every human who had suffered and died under Concord oppression. He placed his hand against the cold metal and made a silent promise. "We remember," he whispered. "We remember every insult, every beating, every child taken to the labor camps, every world they burned to keep us afraid. Today we answer for all of it." The ship hummed around him as the full drive reached full power, and Marcus Chen, Admiral of the Hidden Fleet, walked to his command chair to lead humanity into a new age. The doctrine of silence had served its purpose. Now it was time for the galaxy to hear humanity's voice. High Sovereign Malkith sat upon his golden throne in the great feasting hall of the Imperial Palace, surrounded by the highest nobles of the Kethra Dominion, and he was very pleased with himself. The humans had accepted the increased tribute without resistance, just as he had known they would, proving once again that the short-lived species was nothing more than a useful source of resources and labor. "A toast," he bellowed, raising a goblet filled with wine worth more than an entire human colony, to the continued submission of the galaxy's most pathetic species. His nobles laughed and raised their own goblets, their scales glittering in the light of 1,000 floating crystals that illuminated the massive chamber. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years and saw no reason why their dominance should ever end. Outside the palace windows, the twin suns of the Kethra home system blazed in a sky of perfect blue, and the 7 fortress moons hung like jewels around the planet, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Nothing could threaten them here. Nothing at all. Then the sky turned black. Malkith's wine goblet slipped from his clawed fingers and shattered on the floor as he stared upward in complete disbelief. The light of the twin suns was being blocked by something impossible. A shadow was falling across the planet, a shadow so vast that it seemed to cover the entire sky. And as Malkith watched in growing horror, the shape of that shadow became clear. It was a ship, but no ship could be that large. It was impossible. It defied everything the Kethra knew about engineering and physics and the basic laws of the universe. Then more shadows appeared, and more, until the sky was filled with the silhouettes of warships so massive that the greatest Kethra dreadnoughts looked like toys beside them. "What is this?" Malkith screamed, and his voice cracked with a fear he had never felt in his entire life. Admiral Carvoth, commander of the Home Defense Fleet, burst into the feasting hall with terror written across his scaled face. "High Sovereign, we are detecting thousands of unknown vessels appearing throughout the system. They came from nowhere. There was no warning. Our sensors did not detect any approach." "Impossible," Malkith snarled, but even as he spoke the word, he knew it was meaningless. The impossible was happening right before his eyes. "Get me a visual," he commanded, and a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the hall. What it showed made every Kethra in the room gasp in shock. The ships were beyond anything they had ever imagined, each one stretching for kilometers, covered in weapons arrays and sensor dishes, and armor plating thick enough to survive the heart of a star. They hung in perfect formation around Kethra Prime, like predators circling wounded prey. And on the side of every single ship was painted a symbol that Malketh recognized with dawning horror. It was the flag of united humanity. "The humans," he whispered, and the words felt like poison on his tongue. "This cannot be. They have nothing but frigates. We made sure of it." Then, every screen in the palace, every holographic display in the entire Kethra system, flickered and changed to show a single human face. Admiral Marcus Chun looked out from the display with eyes as cold and hard as the void of space itself. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 300 years of accumulated rage. "I, Sovereign Malkith," Marcus said. "For 3 centuries, you called us vermin. You took our resources and our people and our dignity. You laughed at our short lives and our weakness and our submission." He paused, and his smile was the most terrifying thing Malkith had ever seen. "We remember everything. We forgive nothing. Your empire's surrender is required within 1 standard hour." The transmission ended, leaving only the image of the impossible fleet hanging in the sky. Malkith felt his fear transform into fury as he turned to Admiral Karvoth. "Attack them. Destroy them. I do not care how large their ships are. We have 3,000 vessels and the most advanced weapons in the galaxy." Karvoth hesitated for just a moment before nodding and rushing out to coordinate the defense. The Kethra fleet launched from their fortress moons in perfect formation. 3,000 warships that had never known defeat, their weapons charged, and their crews ready to defend their homeworld. They attacked the human fleet with everything they had. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. Malkith watched from his palace as his mighty armada was swatted aside like insects. The human point defense systems, weapons technology 2 centuries beyond anything the Kethra possessed, destroyed his ships by the dozens with every passing second. Kethra dreadnoughts that had conquered entire civilizations were cut apart by beams of energy so powerful they made the twin suns look dim by comparison. Fighter squadrons that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were vaporized before they could even get within weapons range of the human ships. The fortress moons, each one believed to be impregnable, fell one after another as the human leviathans focused their main batteries on them. Mountains of metal and stone exploded into debris that rained down through the atmosphere. And still the human ships did not advance. They simply hung in space and destroyed everything the Kethra sent against them, demonstrating their absolute superiority without even trying. When the last Kethra warship exploded in a ball of fire, Admiral Karvoth's final transmission echoed through the palace. "High Sovereign, forgive me. We never had a chance." Malkith stood alone in his feasting hall, surrounded by nobles who had fled or fainted or simply stood frozen in shock. And he understood that his empire was finished. The humans had not just built a bigger fleet. They had built a fleet so overwhelmingly superior that the entire Kethra military might had been destroyed in less time than it took to eat a meal. Admiral Chun's face appeared on the display again. 43 minutes remain. I suggest you spend them wisely. Malkith looked at the burning sky, at the debris of his once mighty fleet falling like rain, at the human leviathans that had not even bothered to move during the entire battle. He thought about the 10,000 years of Kethra dominion and how it had all ended in 11 minutes. "Contact the human flagship," he said, and his voice was the voice of a broken creature who had just learned a very hard lesson. "Tell them we surrender." The nobles around him began to wail and protest. but Malkuth silenced them with a look. "They could have destroyed us already," he said bitterly. "They could have turned this planet to ash without breaking a sweat. They want us alive, which means they want something from us." He walked slowly toward the communication console, each step feeling like a journey of 1,000 kilometers. "For 300 years we called them vermin," he muttered to himself. "We took their children for our labor camps, and we laughed at their suffering. Now I understand the truth." He reached the console and prepared to speak the words that would end the Kethra Dominion forever. They were never weak. They were patient. And patience is a weapon more terrible than any we could have imagined. The transmission went out, and High Sovereign Malkuth, ruler of 1,000 worlds, bent his knee to the species he had mocked just days before. By the time the sun set on Kethra Prime, the greatest empire in the galaxy had fallen, and humanity was just getting started. News of the Kethra surrender spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, and by the time a single day had passed, every species in the Galactic Concord knew that the universe had changed forever. In the crystal towers of the Velshan homeworld, the Shadow Council gathered in emergency session, their forms flickering with barely contained panic. "This is impossible," the first Shadow declared. "The humans had nothing but frigates. Our intelligence networks would have detected any military buildup of this magnitude." "Your intelligence networks failed," the second Shadow replied harshly, "just as the Kethra sensors failed. The humans hid an entire fleet from us for 2 centuries. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in the halls of power. The Torgan Imperium, beings of living metal who had never feared any enemy, activated ancient defense grids that had not been powered up in 10,000 years. Their emperor, a construct of fire and steel who had ruled for millennia, gave orders to prepare for total war. The crystalline minds of Axion, a collective intelligence that had always believed itself the most intelligent force in the galaxy, calculated furiously, running millions of simulations trying to understand how their perfect surveillance systems had missed the construction of 4,000 planet-sized warships. Every answer they found made them more afraid. The humans had not just built ships in secret. They had developed technology that surpassed everything the elder races possessed. Their dimensional folding drives allowed them to hide and to move in ways that should have been impossible. And while the elder empires panicked and prepared for a war they could not win, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked into the Emergency Concord Summit with her head held high and a smile on her face. She was no longer bowing. The great hall that had witnessed her humiliation just days before was now filled with terrified delegates, and every single one of them looked at the human ambassador with new eyes. Behind Elena, holographic projections appeared showing the positions of human fleets. They were not just at Kethra Prime anymore. They had simultaneously appeared over the homeworlds of every single elder empire. The Velshan delegates saw their shadow world surrounded by human leviathans. The Torgans saw their metal planet encircled by ships that made their greatest war machines look like children's toys. The crystalline minds watched helplessly as human vessels took up positions around Axion itself. "How is this possible?" the Velshan First Shadow demanded. Elena's smile grew wider. "You set the rules," she said, and her voice echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "You decided that power determined worth. You decided that the strong could abuse the weak without consequence. You decided that empires could rise on the suffering of lesser species." She paused and looked around the chamber at faces that had laughed at her, at beings that had called her people vermin, at empires that had treated humanity like slaves. "Congratulations," she said softly. "We learned your lesson perfectly." The Torgan Emperor stepped forward, his body burning with fury. "You dare threaten us. You dare challenge the elder races. We will destroy you." Elena laughed, and the sound made several delegates step backward in fear. "You already tried," she replied. at Kethra Prime. 3,000 of your finest warships against our fleet. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Would you like to try again? The Emperor fell silent, his flames dimming. Elena raised her hand, and the holographic display changed to show a document. These are our terms. Dissolution of the Concord's military hierarchies. Reparations to every species the Elder Empires have exploited. The release of all enslaved populations throughout the galaxy. And the establishment of a new galactic charter. She looked directly at the Kethra representative, who stood in a corner of the hall looking like he wished the floor would swallow him. Under this new charter, Elena continued, no species, regardless of age or power, will ever be subjugated again. The days of empire are over. The age of equals has begun. The first shadow stepped forward, his form rippling with defiance. And if we refuse? Elena's smile disappeared, replaced by an expression so cold that it made the shadow recoil. Then, you will share the fate of those who refused us at Kethra Prime, she said simply. Your military will be destroyed. Your government will be removed. And you will accept these terms anyway, but from a much weaker position. 3 empires refused immediately. The Velsham believed their shadow technology would protect them. The Torgan believed their ancient weapons would prevail. And the Third Empire, the reach of endless stars, simply could not accept that their 10,000-year reign was ending. Admiral Marcus Chen received word of their refusal aboard the Prometheus, and he felt no satisfaction as he gave the orders that would end their defiance. The human fleets did not waste time with dramatic battles or lengthy sieges. They simply identified every military installation, every government building, every command center in the 3 empires, and destroyed them simultaneously with surgical precision. The Velshan Shadow Council was eliminated in a single strike. Their crystal towers reduced to dust by weapons that could not be stopped or deflected. The Torgan Emperor watched in horror as his ancient defense grids, systems that had been built before humanity even existed, failed against human technology that was centuries more advanced. The reach of endless stars lost their entire ruling council when a human strike team, using personal dimensional fold devices, appeared in their most secure bunker and captured them without firing a single shot. Within 72 hours, all 3 empires had new governments. Governments that were very eager to sign Ambassador Vasquez's charter. The remaining elder races signed without further resistance. Elena stood at the podium as each empire pressed their mark to the document, and she thought about all the generations of humans who had worked and suffered and died to bring this moment about. Some of you are wondering if we have become what we hated, she said, as the last signature was added. If we are simply the new oppressors replacing the old. She shook her head slowly. If we wanted revenge, we would have burned your worlds. If we wanted empire, we would have enslaved your people as you enslaved ours. But that is not what humanity desires. She pointed to the charter, now glowing with the seals of every spacefaring civilization. We want justice. We want freedom. We want a galaxy where no child is taken from their parents to work in labor camps. We want a universe where species help each other instead of prey upon each other. She looked around the hall one final time. The elder races taught us that only power matters. They were right, but they forgot one thing. Power can be used to protect as well as to destroy. The summit ended, and Elena walked out of the hall into a galaxy that was already changing. Throughout the former empire territories, enslaved populations were being freed. On 100 worlds, species that had been oppressed for millennia were seeing their first days of freedom. The Galactic Concord was dead. In its place, something new was being born. And humanity, once the most mocked and abused species in the galaxy, would stand guard over this new order with ships that could end worlds and a determination that could move stars. The elder races had created a monster when they pushed humanity down. Now that monster had become their protector, whether they liked it or not. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Kethra Dominion, and the galaxy had become a place that no one would have recognized before. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on a platform built upon the surface of Luna, Earth's ancient moon, looking up at a wall of black marble that stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. Carved into its surface were names, millions upon millions of names, each one representing a human who had suffered under Concord oppression. Behind him, floating in lunar orbit like a guardian angel, hung the UHS Prometheus, its running lights creating a constellation of stars against the darkness of space. Thousands of people had gathered for this memorial ceremony. Humans from every colony in the old territories, freed slaves from a dozen different species, and even representatives from the former elder races who had come to witness this moment of remembrance. 300 years ago, Marcus spoke into the silence, humanity was judged unworthy by the powers of the galaxy. We were called vermin. We were exploited. We were treated as less than nothing. His voice carried across the memorial plaza, amplified by speakers that sent his words to every ship in orbit and every colony in human space. The names on this wall represent those who did not live to see our victory. They are the children taken to labor camps who never returned. They are the colonists worked to death in mines on frozen worlds. They are the men and women who kept our secret and built our fleet, knowing they would never command it. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. We carry their memory in our hearts. We honor their sacrifice with our actions. We will never allow what happened to them to happen again. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped up beside him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. People ask us if we have become what we hated, she said. If humanity has simply replaced one tyranny with another. The answer is no. She gestured toward the representatives of the elder races who stood in a special section of the crowd. The Kethra still exist. Their worlds are intact. Their people are free. We could have exterminated them, but we chose mercy. We could have enslaved them as they enslaved us, but we chose justice. Former High Sovereign Malkith stood among his people, his once proud bearing humbled by the weight of everything his empire had done. When Elena looked at him, he lowered his head in acknowledgement of his guilt. The new Galactic Charter has been in effect for 1 year, Elena continued, and in that time we have freed over 2 billion slaves from 100 different worlds. We have established courts to prosecute war crimes committed by the Elder Empires. We have begun the work of repairing what was broken. She turned to face the crowd directly. This is not human dominance. This is human responsibility. We have the power to enforce peace, and so we must use that power for the good of all. Throughout the galaxy, similar ceremonies were taking place. On the former slave world of Nix Ari Secundus, where the last survivors of that nearly extinct species had been found hiding in underground bunkers, a human reconstruction team was helping to rebuild their civilization. Commander Sarah Euleran supervised the work herself, standing in the ruins of what had once been a great Nixari city. Beside her stood Talix, one of only 3,000 Nixari left alive in the entire universe. We were supposed to be dead, Talix said, her insectoid eyes reflecting the construction drones that swarmed around them. The Kethra believed they had destroyed us completely. But some of us hid, and we survived, and now we have hope again. Sarah nodded solemnly. The human fleet will protect your world while you rebuild. No one will ever threaten the Nixari again. Talix looked at the human commander with an expression that might have been wonder. Why? She asked. We are few in number and have nothing to offer you. Why do you help us? Sarah smiled. Because 300 years ago, we were you. We were weak and afraid and alone. We know what it feels like to have no hope. And we swore that if we ever gained the power to change things, we would use it to help those who could not help themselves. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the mining colonies that had once belonged to the Torgan Imperium, human engineers were installing modern life support systems that would no longer kill workers through toxic exposure. In the shadow realms of the Velshan, human diplomats were negotiating treaties that would allow free movement and trade between species that had been isolated for millennia. Even the crystalline minds of Axion had begun to change, their perfect logic forcing them to acknowledge that the new order was more efficient and stable than the old. They had become some of humanity's most vocal supporters. Back on Luna, Admiral Chun was finishing his speech. "They called us short-lived," he said, and a small smile appeared on his weathered face. "They thought our brief existence made us weak. They never understood the truth." He gestured at the wall of names behind him. "We build for our children and our grandchildren. We plant trees whose shade we will never sit in. We begin projects we will never see completed. Every generation of humans who worked on the Hidden Fleet knew they would not live to see the victory." His voice rose with passion. "That is not weakness. That is strength beyond anything the elder races could imagine. They live for thousands of years, but they only plan for themselves. We live for less than a century, but we plan for eternity." The crowd responded with a roar of approval that echoed across the lunar surface. Marcus raised his hand for silence one final time. "The elder races taught us their final lesson well. The universe only respects those who demand respect. For 300 years, we submitted, we bowed, we accepted their abuse. Never again." He turned to face the stars. "Let this memorial stand as a reminder to all who would threaten the weak. Humanity remembers. Humanity watches. Humanity protects." High above, the Prometheus and her sister ships maintained their eternal vigil, guardian angels of steel and fire that would patrol the galaxy for generations to come. The ceremony ended, and the crowds began to disperse, but Marcus remained before the memorial wall for a long time. Elena joined him as the sun set behind Earth, casting long shadows across the lunar surface. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked quietly. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "I think we did the only thing we could. The elder races created a galaxy of predators and prey. We ended that. What comes next is up to everyone." She pointed toward the stars, where ships of a dozen different species now traveled freely without fear. "Look at what we built, Marcus. Not just a fleet, but a future. Not just weapons, but hope. The generations who came before us would be proud." Marcus nodded slowly and placed his hand against the memorial wall one last time. "Rest well," he whispered to the millions of names carved into the stone. "Your sacrifice was not forgotten. Your dreams have been fulfilled. The galaxy is free." He turned away and walked toward the waiting shuttle that would take him back to the Prometheus. There was still work to be done, still injustices to correct, still wounds to heal. But for the first time in 300 years, humanity faced the future without fear. The mock species had become the guardians of the galaxy, and they would never let anyone forget the price that had been paid for that transformation. On the memorial wall, carved beneath the final name, was an inscription that said everything that needed to be said. They laughed at our short lives. They did not realize we were counting every single year. The new dawn had come, and it would shine on a galaxy forever changed by the patient rage of a species that had learned to turn weakness into strength. This was humanity's legacy. This was their victory, and it would last forever.